Welcome back, my creative friends. It's me, Susanna Baker, presenting Wynwood Magazine Podcast. Hi, welcome back. I'm Susanna Baker, your host of Wynwood Magazine, where we interview the legends and icons of Miami. And with me today, we have Alan Ket, founder of Museum of Graffiti.
Hey, Susanna. Thanks
Hi,
for having
Alan.
me.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. First of all, I spent the weekend with you. Meaning, I had this amazing book that you guys have to get. It's called The Wide World of Graffiti by Alan Ket. And Alan Ket is just, he just has documented, I would say you've documented your whole life. When did you start, getting momentums? I'm assuming as a kid you started with momentums.
So I started in the 80s documenting graffiti. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and it was a time where there was graffiti and art everywhere. And so I fell in love with all the stuff on the street and on the trains. And early on, I just took a camera out and started taking photos, maybe 1985 or 1986, and never really stopped.
And so you're behind the lens, but you also picked up spray paint cans.
Yeah, so around the same time, maybe a year later or so, I ended up meeting and becoming friends with many graffiti artists or a few kids at school and high school, and I was fascinated by their stories, as much as the art, and I decided to take a try and started painting myself, and it's been a long time. I've been painting for a very long time now.
Wow. Well, I got to tell you something. First of all, kudos to you and Allison for creating the vision and the mission to open up a museum of graffiti in Wynwood.
Thank you.
That's amazing. I've been part of the scene since 2009, and I remember it was about probably 2011, 2012. Is that when you opened up?
No, we opened up much later. We opened up in 2019.
Really?
But, around the time that you started to get on the scene here, I also started coming down and spending some time in Wynwood as a graffiti writer and painting.
Uh-huh.
Wynwood had a special buzz going at the time when, Typo and TCP Crew and Primary Projects were starting to bubble and do stuff here. And they kind of put the word out there to the world. And I had some friends down here that were painters and decided to come down and paint and check it out. And I just kept coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And Wynwood was a very different place those days.
Oh, gosh, yes. I'm so grateful for the Museum of Graffiti and the Art of Hip Hop and your private gallery, because honestly, as everything morphs into Chelsea and Tribeca of the South, because that's what I feel like is happening. Walking down 3rd Avenue, I still feel the old Wynwood. And it's really, you guys having this cornerstone here in Wynwood to stay. I don't think I've appreciated as much coming to your museums as I've had in the last 3 years, because you keep everything documented, everything's alive, everything is here. And the way you do your narratives and the way you do your programming, it's intense. And it's really like kudos, standing ovation, forget about kudos, standing ovation to you and Allison, because it's such a well-planned program that you do. You guys don't play.
Well, it's a museum.
It's a museum.
So, I think that my dream for many, many years was for there to be a museum somewhere in the world that would be dedicated to this art movement. Didn't really matter where, but just that some museum with museum professionals would take on that work and dedicate resources and time to an art movement that I feel is very special and very important to the world. It hasn't happened, and so we decided to do it ourselves. And in order for us to take the mission on of being a museum, we have to be very serious. We have to care about it in a very special way and approach it in a very professional manner. And so we take the responsibility of this work very seriously. I take my responsibility as a museum's curator very seriously and try to create programming and exhibitions that matter, that are historically important, that are educational, and that deliver something special to not only the artist, but to the local community that comes in here and visits and appreciates the museum.
And that's, when I was saying that, it wasn't so much because of more of the professional handle, because being a graffiti writer, photographer, Allison being an attorney, are not the two people I would think would be behind the curatorial program that happens. And getting to meet you, which you're so like, you're such a people person, you're friendly, you're quiet, but when, you're very engaging. And I just didn't see such a seriousness when I first met you. But then when I see you at work and I see you take on a project, there's no fooling around with you. You
Sure.
want to get it. You're a perfectionist. Like, you want to make sure it's understood.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my background as a media professional for a few decades has trained me to do this work. Before launching the Museum of Graffiti, I had a very long and extensive career in media and publishing, also in art and curation around the world. And so I'd been preparing for a long time to be able to do this kind of work. The storytelling that's done at the Museum of Graffiti through exhibitions, it's not unlike, storytelling done in books or in magazines or on the web. And so I have a long sort of history of doing that and of writing, written many, many books on the subject. So as a lover of the movement, as an authority on the scene, it's not so difficult to do.
Yeah.
But it really takes a lot of care and passion and time and resources to do what we do at the Museum of Graffiti. I think that it's not different from any other museum professional in the world that does this work.
Yeah.
We want to approach it with the same level of seriousness, passion, dedication, focus, commitment as anybody else, because ultimately, although we are focused on this genre of art and this, movement, when people come to visit the Museum of Graffiti, they're choosing to come and learn about this movement, and they're choosing to spend their money on a ticket entry to visit. And so we want to give them a great experience, because they could also instead go to PAM or go to the Rubel or go to, wherever else, it's available to them. And so when they come, we want to make sure that we deliver an exceptional experience.
Well, you do. You definitely do. And I am always sending people here only because it is such an engaging experience, and it doesn't just end like there's some, you're invited to some shows and there's like 5 major monumental pieces and then a few, and then it kind of like moves into something totally different. Here, it's a narrative that really flows from wall to wall, from whether you have a movie screen, whether you have live performances, you really engage the culture and you really cultural jam everything from decades, and you put it, you and Allison and the team behind the museum does a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
And the book that you wrote, The Wide World of Graffiti, I loved also. It's almost the same way you break down your museum. You went into sections that made anybody who was a novice or not understanding graffiti and wanted to, get understanding and comprehension, something to a handle on it. You do a great job. I love the way, and I've been, the novice is me, because I don't come from extensive media world or working corporately. I kind of just am the underdog that has a dream and a passion, and try to do as perfect as I can, shooting from the hip most of the time. And I loved what you did in this book, because when I started to interview artists and create the Wynwood art tour in 2009, when no one was walking our neighborhood, I remember when I would talk to street graffiti writers, and they would say, like Ernie Vallis, Atomic, Abstract, I was 13, I was 14, I was shy in school, I would pick up the can and I would write my name, and all of a sudden I had power. It was like a certain power that went through the neighborhood. My name was seen, and then I love the way you write about the different graffiti writers, how the sense of seeing their name go around the urban, perimeters of New York City, Queens, Bronx, and their name is on the train and it's visiting everybody. I never thought of it at that aspect, how that must do to a kid. And so you write on that whole, evolution of how they find their inner voice, where it would have been marginalized. Now it's actually verbalized and visualized, right? It resonates off those steel, train walls and trains. And so I love when you said that. And then I love also, and so this is when you introduced me to the concept of, through individualism, where we all started, where you had Blade and you had Stefan and you had all the names that I can't remember everybody there, but you start with some very unique names that I didn't expect. I expect I would have known a few names and I didn't. And then you say how eventually it went into from an individual person to actually being unified in groups and crews, like United Graffiti Writers.
Sure.
From Philadelphia.
No. So United Graffiti Artists from New York City.
New York City, okay.
But, I want to just interject to say,
yeah, please.
The book coincided with an exhibition at the Museum of Graffiti. And so when I was putting together the exhibition and doing the research and doing the work, there was so much to say, there was so much to share, that the museum, being a small museum, was too small to tell the whole story and include everybody. And so I decided to write a book that was a companion to the exhibition. So this actually was an exhibition at the Museum of Graffiti, where you had a section on graffiti artists that go into the tattoo world, graffiti artists that go into fashion, graffiti artists that go into commercial, design, graffiti artists that specialize on painting freight trains, others that specialize, working on canvas or murals and all these different sort of, subject matters or paths that artists take in their life's trajectory. And so the book, when it says The Wide World of Graffiti, really it means that it's such a big art movement that have so many branches, so many ways that people have approached it and approach it today. So many cities, basically almost every major city in the world has it, and there's thousands and thousands of participants. So it really is a big movement. But the book primarily was to tell the story of how that came to be.
The evolution.
How did it become so global? How did it reach such a wide, group of people so around the world? And so the book kind of takes you on this journey from its humble beginnings in New York City and in Philadelphia and Los Angeles to, okay, now it's, everywhere. It's in Miami, it's in Havana, Cuba, it's in Paris, it's in, Shanghai, it's in Mexico City, wherever. It's just kind of exploded.
One of the things I like that you do also, because you do start with the way it started. Very simple, kid picks up a spray paint can, goes out there and does something, and you talk about the beginning graffiti writers of the 70s, and then you go into your 80s where there's these crews that pop up and become more of a united front, and then you go into a section of what is creative and what is vandalism. And you do that, and you start talking about some of the punishments and the headlines that went globally around the world with some of the graffiti writers that actually got in trouble, and where you talked about Mayor Koch and Mayor Lindsay.
Yeah.
That was me, and now I'm really aging myself, but I grew up with Mayor Lindsay, and Koch was the last mayor when I left New York. Oh boy. And so those are two important names, that really started to go against the graffiti writers movement. And then you go into talk about how it morphs, that these people decide to go into graphic design, into photography.
Sure. So it covers that. I mean, I think that both Mayor Lindsay and Mayor Koch were two terrible politicians that really did not understand what was happening with youth, with the inner city kids, with the connection to funding to schools, to programs that allow for there to be places for kids to express themselves or play, and in the criminalization or in the manipulation of the media to present themselves to be tough on crime. Graffiti kids got a bad rap. And when you look around Wynwood today, when you see something very different, it's a very different approach to art, with the way that the city or business owners treat graffiti artists here. They're celebrated, they're known to be artists, and so they're paid, they're given walls, they're treated fairly, they have opportunity for employment. There's all different kinds of things that happen here. It's quite a contrast to the Koch and Lindsay days.
Absolutely.
And so we're happy that they're dead, and gone, and
we're happy they're gone.
Both for me, later for them, and in all seriousness, and I joke. In all seriousness, there's a generation of people or people that are very conservative and don't really have a heart for youth, and then there are other people that do. And so the world is moving in a way that's much more inclusive or accepting of this art form in some cities, and in some cities not. And so it's always the politicians get involved.
The politicians always are going to get involved, but you know what, the advocates like yourself and people that can create for younger generations to understand that there is a respect, and these are real artists. And they started with marginalized voices. There was a lot of depression in the hood. There was a lot of anxiety, poverty. There was a lot of absentee fathers and single moms all over the place. I'm brought up by a single mom. So I had to have my own dreams, and I was always artsy, but I never picked up a spray paint can. Who knows what would have happened if I did? But I remember seeing Keith Haring in the subway. I remember seeing the graffiti go down, and so I didn't have the respect as a youth seeing it at that point, because it wasn't my world and I didn't understand it. I also couldn't read it. And so one of the interesting things that you break down in your book is that you have to have rules about the written language, that words have rules. And so I was like, huh? Because I've heard by so many graffiti writers that they don't care if you could read my name. It's among their own hood and language that whoever has the more 3D lettering style, the more brighter this and that, the more of an underdog becomes a star among themselves. And it's really among them. And in your book, you take the approach like, no, you can have a lot of room in graffiti, tons of room, but there's still a respect to the letter.
So, yes and no.
Okay.
The movement overall is an outlaw movement. Anybody could join and do it. It's anonymous. People could do whatever they want. So there are rules, but the rules are broken every day. Now, the idea of graffiti is that it is an art form that's based on letter design. But the letters are redesigned every day. Someone comes in, flips it another way, does his own thing, and it's new, and no one can say anything because it's that person's own creative output and creative vision. And so there are people that are more purist that see it one way. There are new, younger people or older, whoever, that see it another way. And so there's all types of people and ideas that are within the movement that sort of push it in one way or another. And I think that's one of the beautiful things of this art form, is that it's open. It's open to interpretation. It's open to our participation. You want to do it, you have to put in the work and participate and create something meaningful, or do it a lot for it to be noticed and for your work to be noticed. And so it's very anarchistic in that way. It's just do it, and it's okay.
And I love that, Alan, because you also talk about how some of these writers, in order to get known, they would tag, like in one city, you could find 20,000 tags of the same name. And that would make the writer super famous in his own hood. But also it was very dangerous because the police already would know that they had 19,000 felonies, or, it became felony instead of a misdemeanor because of these horrible mayors. And one of the things that Chor Boogie told me once, he said, because he's very bright, and a lot of graffiti writers are super bright people. I've been talking to many, and I have to tell you, everybody's really intense and bright. And one of the things that Chor told me was, I loved art. I couldn't wait to get to art class. And when I brought my spray paint can, I got kicked out of the school. And I couldn't believe that they wouldn't allow me to do my spray paint can. And he said, and then they sent me to an after school program, and I took my spray paint can. And then I went, like he said, he got so much in trouble that it changed his whole trajectory of his life, because he hated the educational system and he didn't want anything to do with it. And he says, as soon as I would write my name, on it, and so I would feel something magical happen to me. And so I remember asking him, why your name Chor Boogie? Because they all, and that's another thing when you talk about tags, how they all have tags. And then you talk about later in your book, how some of these people, which like me, I have an absolute huge respect for graffiti writers and a huge respect for the movement, because of Alan Ket, because of the museum, because of these writers that have written, and the passion and commitment to their art craft and process making. You have to have respect, because it ain't just picking up a can. There's so much behind that. Mm-hmm. And so with that, and so I remember Chor saying, because they always made me do chores, and I loved dancing while I was doing them. That's how he got his name, Chor Boogie. And I love that. And I remember talking to Atomic also, and some of these amazing writers that you cover in your book. And again, remember when I tell you I shoot from the hip? I didn't do a lot of research on Alan Ket. I know Alan Ket since 2019 when I met you with Moët Chandon.
Sure.
And we did a couple of things that I always supported and try to cover, and knew how serious of a person you are when it comes to anything that's going to be documented and part of history and published or out there on the wall. And it's really wonderful to see that, considering how at one time it was a fleeting moment that you had to capture.
Right.
And now you have all this time to really write it correctly and make the world understand.
Listen, I think that, with this art movement that is, almost 60 years old, you have people like Crash, who've been painting since the 70s on one side, Entes from Peru, who's been painting for over 20 years on the other side. You have a global movement that's finally starting to receive some recognition and popularity. You have now a museum here in Miami that's dedicated to telling their stories and archiving their work. and pushing the work. We're sitting in a private gallery where we sell the works of these artists, the ones that we really admire and want to help in their careers. And it's very different from a long time ago. You know, we started the Museum of Graffiti because we felt that there was a void and there was no one doing the work that needed to be done. The private gallery was an answer to the need that artists have, like everybody else, to make a living, and they want to do it through selling paintings. And we are positioned to have access to many of the greatest artists of this movement, and so we want to support them and work together for the benefit of everybody. And so, you know, I think being here in Wynwood now for 7 years has allowed us to help and work with many people, many artists, to contribute in a meaningful way. We've had exhibitions around the world. We opened in Shanghai. We had an exhibition in Seoul, Korea.
In Palm Beach.
We've done, you know, Paris, you know, many places, Austin, Texas, whatever. And so we want to continue to spread the gospel of this movement and show the power and the beauty and the importance of all these artists. And that's the work that we do as the Museum of Graffiti. The work that I'm passionate about, that I'm doing today, is that. And you know, I encourage your viewers to come down to Miami, to Wynwood, to the Museum of Graffiti, to the private gallery, to see for yourself what we're doing and how we celebrate what I think is the world's most important art movement, and the art movement that's really defines our times, or at least one of the most important. And so, you know, I really encourage people to come and visit. I think that you'll enjoy it. And if you don't, you can come and see me and we could talk about it. And I'm glad to give you more insight and more information. And it's worth the trip. We're in a special neighborhood. Wynwood is a special neighborhood, as you know, as you've mentioned. This is a neighborhood, unlike other neighborhoods around the world, that is embedded with murals and graffiti and tags and stencils and all types of art and artists from all over the world on the streets. And so a lot of the work that we do is not inside the museum, it's outside of the museum on the walls of the street. But you come here and you land here and you walk around, you take a stroll through the neighborhood, or you take a tour and you see it, but then you come into the museum, and what we try to do is give you more context, more history, more background, so that when you leave the neighborhood, you leave with a much richer and deeper understanding of this art movement.
I absolutely gained a lot of respect for the movement through you, through your books, through your programming. You know, you showed me that a lot of these graffiti writers also introduce fonts into the world of, you know, literal world. The marshmallow font, the, you know, 3D fonts, all the different fonts. I remember one day walking into your museum and seeing like 40 different fonts that you would never really think about. And so, you know, you do educate a lot. Thank God for, you know, artists in the performing arts that respect and do their album covers. Louis Vuitton, who does graffiti on a lot of their designs. You know, there's a lot of newfound respect, old-found respect, and respect that we want our viewers of Wynwood Magazine. And one of the great things I want to tell you also is that this, Alan Ket, who is a renowned writer, author, founder of the museum, also we managed to get him to pick up the pen, and he writes for Wynwood Magazine, and he writes some incredible stories. This was the first one that he wrote, and it was all about the Museum of Graffiti and its evolution. So you want to definitely pick up the art, the Museum of Graffiti, and all about it. And it's all curated by Alan Ket. And then this year with Retina on the cover, Alan did a beautiful, and I thank you so much because I've gotten so many great reviews on this magazine. And how could you not look at this, guys? I mean, that's fire. That's fire.
I like it.
That is so fire. I got to send it to Blade. He's waiting for this magazine. I got the flu right afterwards. But I got to tell you, you want to come, I would definitely suggest for you, when you come to Miami, do the Museum of Graffiti. Do the ticket that takes you to private gallery, takes you to the art of hip hop. Really explore, spend your time here, and then do the Wynwood walls and the area, because this is where you're going to learn. This is the stepping stone that then evolves into everything you see art and visual explosion of color. It all starts right here at the Museum of Graffiti. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I appreciate you.
Likewise.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wynwood Magazine Official and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.